And can you tell me a little about TENI itself?
Yeah. So TENI is Ireland's national transgender organisation. So we work with transgender people and their families. We educate, we raise awareness. So unfortunately, trans issues are quite invisible in Irish society. So we would do a lot of awareness raising, and also we advocate for the rights and equality of trans people across, all levels, I suppose. So we advocate for gender recognition legislation. We work in the healthcare field to try to ensure that trans people are able to be protected, but also access the services that they need.
And how many people in Ireland, trans people, have you helped? Like, how do you know the results of your work?
So we keep track. We document the type of interaction that we have. Last year alone, we had over 700 people contact TENI. This year, it's over 500, and it's only August. We help people directly in terms of people getting in touch with us, and we provide support through information and referrals. So whether people need to get access to peer support groups, or whether they need support from mental health providers or whatever it may be, we do that directly. But we also work with people in terms of providing training. So we got a lot of calls from organizations who, know maybe that they lack the understanding or competency around trans issues and want to do a better job. So they get in touch with us, and we'll go out and we'll train people in the business sector, in the health sector, in the government, anyone basically who gets in touch with us, we're happy to go out and train. So, it's hard to gauge exactly how many people you help, but certainly we do work with people on the ground, and then also to try to ensure that we can change it kind of higher up. So it's the sort of bottom up and top down approach.
And how can people like me, or people in the community watching this, how can we help TENI? How can we help you? Because ultimately what you're doing is fighting for human rights. How can we help the public help TENI fight for human rights?
So absolutely, that's really at the core of what we do. Is it's trans rights are human rights, and we're trying to get that message out there. And I think everybody can play a role in terms of that. You don't need to be transgender identified to support trans rights. We very much look out towards our allies, our friends, our families to step up and talk about trans issues. And I think that's probably one of the biggest barriers we have, is the invisibility of trans issues in broader Irish society. So I think the first step really is to be talking about issues, asking questions, raising it, making sure that, any kind of programs or services you're running, that you're thinking about how they might impact trans people, but also getting involved in campaigns.
Can you tell me what the STAD campaign is actually about?
So the STAD campaign, it stands for Stop Transphobia and Discrimination, and it also happens to be the Irish word for stop. And basically, it's a campaign that TENI started running in 2013 in an effort to record transphobic incidences. So we knew anecdotally that trans people often experience violence, harassment, discrimination, but weren't necessarily going to report it to the guards. So we thought, we need to get a better grasp of what is the extent of this problem and what we can do about it. So we launched it in 2013, and basically what it is we ask the trans community or anybody who's experienced transphobia to report those incidences directly to us.
And with the results of the findings, what do you do with them? Where do you take them?
Well, our hope is that we'll get a clearer sense of how much this is, how big an issue this actually is. And then the idea would be one, we have documentation of the extent of this issue, but that also we'll be able to use it with the guards specifically to advocate for change. So that can look like a variety of things. One, it can look like training with the guards, so work with them more closely to ensure that they're trained up on trans issues so that they can go into the trans community, and that the trans community will feel comfortable and confident in reporting these crimes. And also so that we can work with them to implement a better monitoring system. So at the moment, transphobia isn't specifically recorded in the Pulse system. So the Pulse system is how the guards kind of take down, a crime or an incident. And at the moment, you can record incidences that are homophobic. So they can tick a box that says homophobic, but they can't tick a box that says transphobic. So if something happens, we don't know if that's because somebody just had bad luck or were targeted for just, being in the wrong place or wrong time, or if they were specifically targeted for how they express their gender identity or just how they live and present, and if they're trans, if that's a reason why they experience that crime. So we'd be hoping to work with the guards to change that so we'd get a better sense of what that looks like for them. And then also, finally, we'd be looking at trying to bring in hate crime legislation, so lobby the government to bring in hate crime legislation, because Ireland's the only country in the EU that doesn't have explicit legislation that protects people in terms of hate-motivated crimes.
And who's funding you? Who's funding TENI?
Well, that's the question. Like most NGOs, we struggle. Trans issues, again, unfortunately, aren't something that is a high priority.
An NGO is
a non-government organization. So we're part of civil society, and we work in terms of this human rights agenda. But unfortunately, there's very little money in that. So we receive some funding through the HSC to do the work that we do in terms of support and the work in the kind of healthcare sector to ensure that there's better services, healthcare services for trans people. But then we also receive some philanthropic funding from organizations that want to promote the human rights of trans people. But, it's a slog. We're not unfortunately flush with cash. So that's an ongoing challenge as well, to ensure that we can get the funding that we need to operate, to push these campaigns that are so necessary.
So that's how the public could help you. That's something
money, always.
And tell me, like stuff like with Laverne Cox been on the cover of Time magazine, one of the stars of Orange is the New Black, and you have a lot of trans people in the entertainment industry rising to the fore. Is that making your struggle a little easier in terms of trans awareness?
Definitely. I think, in the last couple of years, you've seen this real emergence of trans people and very diverse trans voices in popular culture. And that's been fantastic because, one of the big challenges we have is that, when we're talking about trans issues, it seems so hypothetical to people. They don't know a trans person, or they don't know if they know a trans person. And that makes it hard for them to connect to the issues on an emotional level, because it seems something kind of, sure, equality for everyone, rights, but there's nothing that really draws them into our struggle. But I think when you see such, such role models like Laverne Cox and others who are so outspoken,
like you,
hopefully, so articulate, it goes such a long way to just make people understand that it is about rights, but it's also very human. It's about people being able to live with dignity, being able to get through their days, being able to exist and feel not just tolerated, but actually accepted, feel part of society and not on the fringes, because so many people do. So I'd be optimistic that having such, high profile people out there speaking out has a huge effect on our day-to-day lives of going, yeah, I can do that. I could be an actor or an actress, but I could also be a barrister, a solicitor. I could be a journalist. I could be, it gives people...
Or someone that could run an NGO.
Or somebody who could run an NGO, like me. It gives people the feeling that there's possibilities. And I think if you live on the fringes for a long time, you sometimes feel like you don't have those options. And so I think seeing people from a variety of different sectors speaking out about being trans and it just being part of their experience, it has a huge impact on people's ability to go, yeah, I can do that. I'm going to do what I want to do, and being trans shouldn't stop me, and I should have equal rights, and I should feel like my identity matters. And so, I'm hopeful that things like this and Laverne and, just this kind of critical mass of trans voices will push us over into a time when we're not going to have to be scrounging around just trying to fight for basic human rights.